Welcome to the Talkology Show. Sit down, pour a cup of coffee, and enjoy.
What's up, y'all? I just recorded this fantastic episode with Greg Koukl, so let's jump right in.
Let's start with your journey. What first inspired you to start Stand to Reason?
Well, I had been a Christian. Let me think. I was 43 at the time, became a Christian when I was 23. So I'd been a Christian for 20 years at that time. Became a Christian out of college. Actually, I was at UCLA at the time, and then for 20 years I had been doing lots of different things. But even though I was working, I was also on the side doing ministry, talking to people, engaging and evangelizing, and studying apologetics because I was really, really interested in apologetics. And after about 20 years, um, I really wanted to make a contribution, larger contribution to what was going on. And Kaleb, everybody, it seemed like it was talking about spiritual things in public. They were really shrill. In other words, they were kind of a little bit hostile, all the conversations. And I thought, wow, that's not good. The idea, basically, if you're getting in a discussion with somebody and anybody gets mad, well, you're not going to win. You're not going to win them is the point because they're angry or you're angry, and this just doesn't play well. So I wanted to tone the conversation down. I wanted to model something more like an ambassador model, so a diplomatic model. And this is what I saw actually in Scripture. So Paul says we are ambassadors for Christ in 2 Corinthians 5:20, and or maybe it's 21, but right in there. And so I thought, wow, that's one thing I could maybe help with. The other thing was that even though we have the best things to think about, so we've got the best answers to the toughest questions about life, the kind of questions everybody's asking sooner or later. What's it all about? Why am I here? Is there meaning to life? Any purpose to life? What about my own hunger for belonging or even forgiveness? Because we all know that we've done lots of bad things, and that guilt kind of weighs on us. What's the way out? Well, we have the best answers for that, Kaleb. And it didn't seem like very many Christians who were engaged in conversation were offering those answers in a very compelling way. Now, right around that time, I had started a second master's degree. First one was in apologetics, and the second one was in philosophy. Now I'm starting to get more tools to help explain the significance and adequacy, value of the Christian worldview. And so that was like, wow, that was a big experience for me to learn a bunch of new stuff. So I thought I could bring all of this stuff that I had learned and was learning to the table to do two things then, and that is to calm the language down, calm the conversation down a little bit, and also bring more careful thinking to the whole process. So those two things were really, really significant. One other thing, so I said shrill, shallow is the second thing. And the third thing is kind of silent. So if it wasn't shrill, it wasn't going on at all because Christians didn't know how to engage. So those are three things that come to mind when I think about why I started Stand to Reason now 32 years ago, to train Christians to think more carefully about their convictions and to make a thoughtful and gracious but effective defense for classical Christianity and classical Christian values.
So when did you start it?
Well, that was 32 years ago. We just had our 32nd anniversary, actually, in May now. And that was 1993.
Okay.
So it's, I was 43 years old at the time. And I had been a Christian 20 years. By the way, that's significant for guys like you because you get a big head start on me. You're 13, is that right?
14 now.
14 now. Okay, good. So we got to update your bio. 14. So that you got roughly 30-year jump on me. Well, actually, that's when I became a Christian. You've been a Christian for a while, but you're now getting actively involved. So, I mean, presumably you didn't become a Christian yesterday
No,
or last
no.
week. Okay. All right. So that was the timing of the organization. Yeah.
Okay. In your experience, what's the biggest mistakes Christians tend to make when trying to defend their faith?
Well, I think one of them is to be too defensive in a way. Obviously, we are supposed to make the case that Christianity is true. That's defending the faith. That's apologetics. From that Greek word in what is it, First Timothy 3:16. Always be ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an answer. Okay, Peter says that the word defense is apologia. So, but it's almost like they get too intense about it and they want to have a fight with somebody. And now sometimes the fight is started by the other person, right? So, already it's getting a little bit testy. But that's a big mistake. I also think another thing is, and this has taken me a lot of years to have it all come together for me, Caleb, and that is trying to do too much in one conversation. So we learn evangelism, and a lot of times there's a simple little evangelistic presentation. We talk about how God loves people and He's got a plan for their lives, and but we've sinned against God, and so we need to be saved from our sin by the forgiveness Jesus provides, and then we need to receive Jesus as Lord and Savior, and then become Christians to resolve that issue. Now, that's a very good simple characterization of the broader issue. Here's the problem, here's the solution, act. The problem with that in application is that lots of people, most people, especially in Canada, I think, are not really ready
Mhm.
kind of out of the gate to go the whole distance in a
Yeah.
short conversation. I became a Christian in the Jesus movement, and that was a long time ago. That was in the last millennium. So the things were easier then because people were open, and we also had the background of a Christian culture that was still highly favorable in people's minds, not negative like it is now in people's minds. So it was easier just to kind of cut to the chase and do the simple gospel, and people responded. A lot of them did. But there was also a movement of the Holy Spirit going on that time. I don't know if you saw the movie The Jesus Revolution. Oh, okay. Well, that was all about the Jesus movement, for
Mhm.
example. And so it was a kind of a heady time spiritually, and a lot of people became Christians. Now things have changed quite a bit. And so consequently, um, I don't focus on the harvesting.
Mhm.
All right. I don't focus on the harvesting, trying to get people to receive Christ. I focus on the gardening. When you think about it, before Jesus says in John 4, one sows and another reaps.
Yeah.
All right. And I call it, one gardens and the other harvest, because if you don't have a gardening, you're not going to have a harvest. I mean, this is pretty common sense. In agriculture, it's also really true, I think, when it comes to spiritual things. And so sometimes we are taught to try to get the decision right away.
Mhm.
Turns out there weren't any altar calls in the book of Acts, or
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus wasn't challenging him nor the disciples after him to receive Jesus as Lord and Savior.
Mhm.
Pray the prayer, bow your head, every eye closed and head bowed kind of thing. It never happened. Something else was going on. They were communicating the truth as they could in a number of different circumstances that they faced.
Mhm.
And then when the fruit was ripe, it just fell into the basket.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know. That's what happened to me on September 28th, 1973. That was my spiritual birthday, kind of. And when my brother came up to tell me more about Jesus to my apartment near UCLA, I just told him, "Look, Mark, you don't have to tell me any more about Jesus. I've already, what I remember saying is I've already decided I want to become a Christian."
Mhm.
And then he says that I said, I already am a Christian.
Mhm.
Well, in either case, Mark did not harvest me.
Yeah.
I harvested myself. You know,
Yeah.
I was ready. The fruit was falling into the basket because it was ripe.
Mhm.
And here's the difficulty, I think, Caleb, with the this mistake that Christians make, or that they think they have to kind of push for a decision,
Mhm.
is that a lot of Christians, look, the majority of Christians, I think, when they consider that if they have to engage, they have to try to encourage people to receive Christ and try to get a decision. That's just so scary to them. They don't even try,
Yeah.
and they just sit on the bench.
Yeah.
And so nothing gets happen, and nothing happens with them. And then they feel guilty about it. The approach that I've taken, I talk about this in two books that I've written that are kind of joined at the hip. The first one is Tactics. I don't know if you're familiar with that particular
I
book,
haven't
but
read Tactics, but I've read Street Smarts.
oh, okay. Well, Street Smarts, that's the
Yeah.
second one. Oh, good. And there's a whole chapter on gardening in there.
Yeah.
So I emphasize that now that if you have gardening tools, so to speak, that's what those books are meant to provide, then you can navigate in a much more relaxed fashion
Mhm.
and just try to do a little here, a little there. And maybe the next person is going to do a little bit more, and then pretty soon God will bring that non-Christian person to a point of harvesting. But we're all working together is the idea, doing a little bit. A lot of workers in the field, no one person necessarily is doing the whole job. So those were um, I don't know. I'm trying to remember the question. Oh, the question was what kind of mistakes do people make? And that's one. They get defensive. They get their attitude, like they get a little cranky when they share because dukes are up, so to speak. And another is that they are they try to do too much. So I'm just encouraging the gardening approach. And the way we do that, as you know from the book, and I won't go into detail unless you want to ask more about this, but is using questions. By using questions in a particular way, it makes everything so much easier.
Mhm. Well, it's kind of my next question because uh, for those who aren't familiar with the Columbo tactic, what is it and why is it so effective?
For those that aren't familiar, what was the last part? Uh,
For those who aren't familiar with the Columbo tactic, can you explain what it is and why it's so effective?
yeah, sure. Now, I suspect you and your friends have no idea who Lieutenant Columbo is.
Well, I know who he is as a pop culture, but no, I've never seen any of his.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, so that's a big leg up because a lot of times, especially if I speak to youth, I say, and how many have no idea who I'm talking about? And everybody raises their hands. But he's a great example from TV culture, back when TV before cable was a big deal. Okay, now cable's everything. And so when he was the most recognizable TV icon of all time, he was so popular. Everybody knew who Lieutenant Columbo was, and he came across as kind of a bumbling guy. Peter Falk was the actor. Did you see Princess Bride? That movie, Princess Bride? Okay. Well, some people might remember him from the grandfather that was reading the Princess Bride story to the kid in bed when he was sick, and that's how the story kind of unfolds. So, anyway, he comes in kind of bumbling. He's a murder detective. The murder's already been committed. He's got to solve the crime. He's walking around the crime scene. The body's laying there, whatever. And he scratches his head, mumbling to himself, and he doesn't look like he's very smart.
Mhm.
But he's stupid like a fox because he's got a plan. And he starts asking these questions. And he's getting more information. There's something about this thing that bothers me. He says, and finally, do you mind if I ask you a question? Then he asks a question. Then he gets the answer. Oh, thank you. You're very intelligent. No, wait a minute. One more thing.
Oh, there's one more thing, sir.
And then he one more tings him to death with question after question and starts to annoy people a little bit. He said, I'm sorry, I can't help it. It's a habit to ask the questions. And this is what the Columbo tactic is based on, the habit I want all Christians to get into when they're engaging people on the gospel or any challenging topic, even with other Christians, when it comes to maybe differences of opinion. Ask lots of questions. And there's a specific set of questions that I suggest. I'll just give you the two because there's only three parts to the game plan. And the first one is you're gathering information. If you have somebody that's challenging you, let's just say a person says, well, the Bible's been changed. You can't trust the Bible. It's all been changed. That's 2,000 years ago. You don't know that what you have now is the same thing they wrote then. Well, that's the challenge. So when somebody says the Bible's been changed, I want them to give me more information. So I'm just going to say, what do you how the model question here is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And it's applied in different circumstances, different ways. So in this case, if he said the Bible's been changed, I said, well, what do you mean? How do you think it's been changed? Then I want him to explain it. Now, part of the deal here, Kaleb, is there are a lot of people who have heard things from other people to challenge the Christians with, but turned out they never thought about it themselves. It isn't like they looked it up or anything. And so they seem very bold with this. And a lot of the Christians don't know how to respond when they say, well, the Bible's been changed. Notice he's, pardon me, stating what he thinks is a fact. Well, I'm going to ask him what he means by that first out. So what do you mean? What do you mean the Bible's been changed? I want him to tell me what he thinks took place. Well, somebody wrote something down thousands of years ago and a bunch of people copied it, and then they copied the copies and they copied the copies. And you know how the telephone game, you tell one thing to one person, you tell another. Pretty soon it gets all changed. So who knows? Now, if they were able to give an explanation like that, that's kind of unusual. Most people can't explain even what they mean when they say the Bible's been changed. But nevertheless, I want them to talk for a while. That takes the pressure off of me and it gives me more information. All right. So now I know what he believes. The second step is to want to find out why he believes what he believes. And in this case, so the model question is, how did you come to that conclusion? And it can be expressed in different ways, of course. And so I'm going to say, okay, I understand what you think happened. The Bible was changed. Now here's the question I have. Why do you think it happened that way? Okay, that's a different question, really. That's the reason and rationale for the point of view he's just given. And so I want to hear from him and see what he has to say. Now I know the answer to this question. I mean, if he just said that to me, I could say it hasn't been because of this, that, and the other thing. But see, I've got some education in that. And the more education any Christian gets into anything like this, the more they'll be able to respond to it. But nevertheless, most Christians don't have all that. They have, they may know some things, they may not. But the point I'm making here is I wouldn't even give my explanation right out of the gate. I would ask questions first because it softens the circumstance. I'm not preaching at them. I'm letting them talk to me. And it gives me more time to collect my thoughts so I can have a clear idea of maybe where I want to go in the conversation, or maybe I won't go anywhere because I can't take it any further. But the key thing there is it's more relaxing. And there's a chapter in this book, Street Smarts, that you mentioned, that says questions keep you safe. Questions keep you safe. So if you're asking questions, you're not making statements. If you're making statements, they can ask questions to you about your statements.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're asking questions, you're not making statements. You don't have anything to defend, technically speaking. Makes it a lot easier. But it turns out you can, even though you're not making statements, you can make a lot of progress with using questions, which is the same way that Lieutenant Colombo proceeded. So that's in a nutshell the Colombo tactic and why I named it after him. Now, people might want to go to YouTube or something and watch some old episodes of Colombo to see him in action, but you'll see what I'm talking about. And then he kind of towards the end, he's got so much information, he springs the trap, and catches the bad guy kind of thing. Now, people we're talking to are not bad guys. That's not the point I'm making. They're not enemies of us, but but the point is that after you've done some of this, it's a lot easier to help them see maybe the error of their ways.
We live in a time when speaking up about moral or cultural issues can feel risky. How should Christians respond when they feel pressure to stay silent?
Like cultural issues, did you say feel pressures on these?
When they feel pressure to stay silent.
Pressure to stay silent. Okay, that was more clear. Well, people stay silent, I think. Christians do for a couple of reasons. One of them is they're scared.
Yeah.
And I actually talked about that a little bit in the Street Smarts book, and that is it's understandable to be scared. Even Jesus in Matthew 10 told the disciples three different times, do not, he's about to send them out on their short-term missionary trip.
Mhm.
And he says three times, do not fear, do not fear,
Yeah.
do not fear. Now he has a little different rationale in each time, but your listeners can check that out, Matthew 10. But the point is, he tells them, do not fear, because there's a tendency to be fearful.
Mhm.
And that's I think a liability for Christians, understandable. But the way to deal with fear is knowledge. I mean, that's one of the elements. So think about this. I don't know, Caleb, do you like taking tests?
No.
No, okay. Well, most people don't. I ask an audience, how many people like taking tests? Like three people raise their hand. But I know why they raise their hand. In the next statement, the next question makes the point. How many people here like taking tests when you know the answers? All right, so everybody's hands go up. And the reason those three people raise their hands because they know the answers, because they're good students.
Yeah.
I always kind of like that myself. I don't mind taking tests. I know the answers because I worked. Let's go. Let's have at it. But if you don't know the answers, then you're going to be nervous and afraid, and it's going to be difficult. Okay, so I think Christians don't step out more because that's one of the biggest things, I guess, is they're just afraid.
Mhm.
And they think that, well, people are going to be mad at me. Well, I could be,
Yeah.
but neither in America or in Canada is anybody going to kill you for that. Although we just had a recent
Yeah.
unfortunate episode of that with Charlie Kirk. Nevertheless, that doesn't happen around here very
Yeah.
often. It does in other countries,
Yeah.
in communist countries especially, but it doesn't happen here. So what's the threat? Well, people be mad at you. You lose friends. Well, that's not fun, but it's not death.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we over exaggerate the pain it's going to cause us to be rejected by others. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that. I don't like being rejected either, but many other Christians have paid much greater
Yeah.
price, and not just death, but death under severe torture. There's a book called it's a book of martyrs. Oh, nuts! I'm forgetting the whole title now. The something Book of Martyrs. It's the
Fox's
guy's
Book
name.
of Martyr? Is it
Huh?
Fox's Book of Martyrs?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you, Caleb. 14-year-old Caleb, you're helping the old guy out here. Okay, Fox's Book of Martyrs, and you read that and you realize, oh, holy cow, man, these guys really had to pay the price. And sometimes that encourages us to step up a little bit. Now, so I think that the big reason is that they're afraid. And excuse me, one of the reasons they're afraid is they're not prepared. They don't know the answers,
Yeah.
which is why I do what I do, and you're doing what you do with your
Yeah.
show, is to help encourage Christians with answers so that they won't be so afraid. And yeah, I think those are the biggies right now.
Outside the Bible, what's one book that's deeply shaped your thinking and approach to apologetics?
Well, it's hard. It's hard to pick just one. Or two come immediately to mind, and the earliest writings that I read on apologetics um, are are by a guy named Francis Schaeffer, who died in the 80s. And he wrote a few books that I read. They're a little bit heady. Um, there are three of them in particular. They're called The God Who Is There, He Is There, and He's Not Silent, and Escape from Reason. Those three books. Now they're combined together in one volume published by Crossway. I think it's called the Schaeffer Trilogy, Schaeffer. Those three books helped me tremendously because they were looking more a little bit from a philosophical perspective on how adequately and profoundly Christianity answered the biggest philosophical questions. That was huge for me. It also, there were other things in it that really helped me even today. And that is that everybody's made the image of God, and everybody has to live in the world that God made. So it doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter what age and period of time, or age of the people, like millennials or Gen Zs or boomers. They make all these divisions. Oh, I have to really understand how boomers work, or no, boomers, no one cares about us anymore. It's more like Gen Zs or millennials or whatever, or who knows what they call them. When they hit Z, I thought, great, they ran out of letters, so maybe they'll stop doing this, but they still do. So certainly there are distinctives to each of those kind of cultural groups, and so you have to think like a missionary. But one of the things that Francis Schaeffer made clear is that everybody is made the image of God, and everybody is has to live in God's world. And so, if God made this world, then it reflects Him, and what you're going to look around and see His fingerprints, so to speak. In other words, you're going to see things that an atheist can't explain, like the origin of the universe, or the design features of the universe. Or the origin of consciousness, or the origin of life. I mean, these are really unique kinds of things. How did this happen? No naturalistic explanation is available for any of this, or no convincing one. People make up all kinds of ideas, but they're just so far-fetched. There's no way that they're plausible. And so what this means is that what they are doing is they're bumping into reality. They're bumping into features of the real world that their worldview can't explain. Now, keep in mind, if you have a worldview that you think is true, it better explain the world.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea of a worldview. And if some of the most important details of the world reality that you encounter cannot be explained, even in principle, by your worldview, like atheism cannot explain the problem of evil, because the problem of evil requires objective morality, and they don't believe in objective morality generally. At least that's what they say, because that's what their worldview requires. But then at the same time, they complain about evil things in the world, and wait, what are you talking about? I thought you're an atheist, you don't believe in good and evil. Oh, they don't think. Why do they say those things, though? It's because they're made in the image of God, and they live in God's world. So that's an insight I got from Francis Schaeffer. The other book that I think is really wonderful, and also one of the most quoted books by, I suspect it is the most quoted book by all apologists who write about apologetics. You want to guess which one that is?
I have no idea.
C.S. Lewis's Mere
Oh,
Christianity. Have you read that one yet?
I haven't read it. I don't enjoy C.S. Lewis.
Oh, really? I'm curious why.
I don't enjoy his writing style actually that much.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Well, good. Now, I wrote a book because that book is so popular. I wrote a book that kind of is similar to his in terms of the topic. It's called The Story of Reality. So, Mere Christianity is meant to explain Christianity to a secular public. And he gave those talks on BBC radio in the late 40s, and then it became a book in the early 50s. And I think it's a really great job. But a lot of people say they have a hard time reading Lewis. Maybe that's you. You don't like his style. I really like his style a lot, so I made my version. In other words, I'm not comparing myself to Lewis, but I'm just saying I wrote a book called The Story of Reality that's meant to cover the basics of Christianity in a way that's an easy to read style. And I tried to copy Lewis's voice, his style, narrative style a bit. Most people like it, but if you don't like his style, then you probably aren't going to like Story of Reality. I don't know. But anyway, his ability to take um, somewhat complex concepts and throw the ball so people can catch it, make it accessible. And his style. Now he's a Brit, so he has a little bit of a British cast to his narrative, but I think that makes it more readable. Maybe you disagree. That's okay. But in any event, Lewis and the content that he has been really helpful to me. And like I said, he's quoted in so many. I don't think there's hardly a book I'm thinking now that I've written. Certainly, Story of Reality, certainly Tactics, certainly Street Smarts. I have a book called Relativism, and I don't know if I quoted him in there, but the many authors will quote these verses because they're so well done. So, Francis Schaeffer and C.S. Lewis, both guys that have been gone quite a long time, have been my favorites. Now, there's a gazillion other people that write fabulous stuff, but they're more targeted to particular issues, like the reliability of the Gospels, and that's J. Warner Wallace wrote a book called Cold Case Christianity. You got Frank Turek, who wrote with Norm Geisler, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, and it's got a range of arguments there. There's a lot of books out there that are really great, but most of them are are narrow, not broad, targeting things. So the two ones that made the biggest influence on me, I would say, are those two authors. And actually J.P. Moreland too. But he's alive. He's a philosopher, and he was one of my mentors. I took a master's degree in philosophy under him, and he's done a lot of writing, but his stuff is not like popular work. He's done some popular work, but he has a lot of philosophical stuff too. But that's helped me tremendously.
Okay. Looking back on your career, what's some advice you would give to young people who are looking to get into apologetics?
Well, I have a two basic things I tell, because I get this question asked quite a bit. It's a good question, Kaleb. And they are the things that really were foundational for me. The first thing is, my wife used to have this little, like a flower deal, on a plaque that she had on a cabinet many years ago. And underneath it said, "Bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted." And I remember that, and I realized that does characterize the way I comported myself as a growing Christian. I just took whatever opportunity was in front of me, and I used it. I did what I could. If I met people that didn't know much about the Bible, I knew a little bit more. I said, "Why don't we get together on Friday night or Wednesday night or whatever, and we'll have a little Bible study." So when I was first a Christian at UCLA, I did some of those things. Then I had an opportunity to go on some summer outreach projects. Both of these were in Waikiki in Hawaii, and I thought, hey, somebody's got to suffer for the Lord at Waikiki Beach, right? So I'll do the suffering there. But that was like a 10-week project. I signed up for things. And I had opportunities at church, hey, can anybody deal with this issue? Well, I can. That's an area that I have something to say about. So I would teach the class or something. The point is every little thing that I could see where I could be useful, especially in things that I have a capability of speaking to, I did that. And after, so that's it. And as time went on, there were more opportunities that were given to me to do things like that. Because if you're faithful in smaller things, you'll be given larger things, So that's a motif. That's a standard that I really followed. And I think you're an example of this. I don't know anything about your life, Kaleb, but here you are behind the microphone, starting up a podcast and or YouTube thing. And you saw an opportunity. This is what people are doing now to make a difference. You get yourself some equipment and you do a show, and then see what happens. Sometimes you're going to get a following, sometimes you don't. But I tell you what, you are getting two things: you're getting experience, trying something out, and getting better at it. And secondly, even if 6 months from now this doesn't work out, there have been people who listen to your podcast, maybe not enough, I don't know, but that are influenced by what you've done. So you are blooming right where you're planted right now in Calgary. Oh wait, are you in Alberta? Is that what you said?
Alberta, yeah.
Are you in Calgary?
No.
Oh, okay.
We're closer to Edmonton.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. So that's the first thing. Bloom where you're planted. Look around for opportunities. Take the things that are given to you. I've talked to people who said, "Yeah, I'd like to do what you do." I said, "What do you mean?" "Oh, how can I get up on a big stage and speak to a bunch of people?" See, and they're thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking that's not the right attitude. You know, if you're trying to be a superstar, you don't belong in this club because that's just not going to work. And you have no idea how much work is involved to be in a position where you're given the opportunity to do that kind of stuff. And if you haven't done the work and you get that opportunity, it's going to hurt you and it's going to hurt others. All right, because you're not ready for it. So, but most people are like offering the question, how can I be more effective? Okay, think about this, bloom where you're planted. Do what you can do right now, whatever that is. Could be really creative, like what you're doing. It could be not creative at all, but it's something. Start getting useful in the area of your interest. The second thing is to be a student of your craft. Be a student of your craft. So apologetics is a craft. How is it when we defend the faith? How do we defend the faith? Apologetics. Well, we do it by communicating. There are basically three methods of communication: talking, broadcasting, or speaking. So you're broadcasting, speaking to a larger group, or you could be standing on a stage speaking to a larger group. So you got individuals, you have larger groups, or you have writing. Every one of those is a craft, Kaleb. Every one of those entails different skills. Now, there are skills that are necessary for each one of them because, structuring what you have to say, that's true of all of this. But there are also different skills that are generic to the particular discipline. So when you're talking with people on the one-on-one, it's not the same as talking to an audience. There's different dynamics that are there. You don't go back and forth with an audience. You do back and forth with a person. That's where the tactics book and the street smarts books come in. Then when it comes to say broadcasting or speaking to an audience or writing, there's a whole bunch more there. So if my recommendation is to people just getting started, if apologetics is your area of interest, you want to become a student of that craft. That means you're going to be studying more apologetics so you understand how ideas work and how you respond to it. But then you're also looking at how you can communicate better behind a microphone, in front of an audience, or on paper. I mean, lots of people send me things, well, I don't really receive. Will you read my book? Critique it. Well, I don't have time to do that. I got my own team that I'm working with. But they write a piece and then they give it to me. I said, you got too many words here. And okay, let's go over it. And bang, 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 I'm redlining all these words. And we were talking off the air a moment ago about Tim Barnett on Stand to Reason, Mr. B, and Red Pen Logic. Have you seen the Red Pen Logic?
I haven't seen too much of that, no.
Oh, okay. Well, RPL, people can go to YouTube and just look up Red Pen Logic, and you're going to get a bunch of these little vignettes that Tim does. He's very skilled at this. But, when he started a couple of years ago, we worked together on every single thing. So he's learning the craft. Now he really does it well now. He doesn't need my help. But this is part of what I mean by learning the craft. And people write with too many words. You want to trim it down. You want to make it brisk and flowing so people don't get bored, that kind of stuff. So these are just parts of the craft. And by the way, you develop your craft over longer periods of time. And you develop best when people who are listening or benefiting from what you're saying are able to give you educated feedback.
Yeah.
That was good, but this, like I said, too many words here. This line here, you just said the same thing in this line as you just said here. So you don't need the second line. That just takes up too much space. You already did well this, blah, 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 blah. So so that's the recommendation I would give. Bloom where you're planted. Find something to start doing. And if you're interested in apologetics, start reading books, taking classes, studying, talking with other people about it. You probably have friends, Kaleb, who are kindred spirits. They're interested in apologetics too. Then talk back and forth about stuff. Watch a debate on YouTube or something or a podcast, and then turn it off or pause it, and then talk with your friends about it. Gee, this guy said such and so, the atheist or whoever. How would we respond? What's wrong with that view? And then you discuss it a little bit. Then you go back to the debate and see how the Christian guy responded to it. Lots of stuff on YouTube now with that. Tons of stuff like that. That as a group you could be watching and learning. So those are some examples of what I'd suggest.
Well, thank you so much for being on here today. So where can people get in contact and learn about you and your company?
Well, the organization that I represent is called Stand to Reason, and the acronym is STR. And so the website's really easy, str.org, str.org. That's the best place I'd suggest. Now, people can go to YouTube, of course, and just type my name in, Greg Koukl or Gregory Koukl, or just Koukl, Koukl, and there's a bunch of stuff that's going to come up. And they can just watch what they want there. But we have a great website with lots and lots and lots of training tools at str.org, and that's going to help, I think, them tremendously. So that would be the first place I'd suggest. I have a podcast I've been doing for 35 years. Actually, it was a radio show, and it still is on radio now, but now most of the listeners are podcast listeners. And I also, one of my own, I do 2 hours a week, and then I do 2 half hours a week with Amy Hall, and that's called #STR Ask. And in both cases, people basically call in with questions, and we answer the questions. But if people want to listen to #STR Ask, and all these links, I think, are at the bottom of the homepage at str.org. Then they get Amy in the mix, and she's fabulous. So that I would recommend the podcasts as well.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. And to everyone listening, thanks for listening, and keep asking good questions. And we'll see you next time on the Talkology Show.